Hey everyone, it's Mikki here. You're listening to Wikipedia. This week on the podcast, I speak to returning guest and women's health expert and naturopath, Dr Lara Briden, who joins me for a thoughtful, wide-ranging conversation about women's health, medical narratives, and the modern pressure to optimise. Together, we explore how well-intentioned health messaging can sometimes tip from supportive into overwhelming, particularly for midlife women navigating hormonal change in a culture saturated with advice, diagnostics, and self-monitoring. We discuss the difference between body awareness and body trust and how historical and cultural medical narratives shape the way women interpret symptoms. Our conversation also challenges the idea that health must always be pursued at the level of optimization, introducing the concept of being healthy enough, not as a lowering of standards, but as a way of leading health support life rather than dominate it. I really enjoyed this conversation and think this episode will resonate with anyone who has felt exhausted by the constant focus on hormones, symptoms, and self-improvement, and is looking for a more grounded, humane way to think about women's health. And I'll say that the origin of this came from a post Lara had popped on social media, just really asking the question, maybe you're okay. You know, are you okay? Maybe you are. Sort of putting to us just that this constant striving for health, how necessary that is truly. So anyway, those of you unfamiliar with Lara, I'd be super surprised if anyone was out there who didn't know Lara. She's been on the podcast several times and I've popped her appearances in the show notes as well. She is a naturopathic doctor and best-selling author of the books Period Repair Manual and Hormone Repair Manual, as well as The Metabolism Reset. These are practical guides to treating period problems, hormonal challenges, and just overall health with nutrition, supplements, and bioidentical hormones. With a strong science background, Lara sits on several advisory boards and is the lead author of a 2020 paper published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. She has more than 20 years' experience in women's health and currently has consulting rooms in Christchurch, New Zealand, where she treats women with PCOS, PMS, endometriosis, perimenopause, and many other hormone and period-related health problems. So I have popped out where you can find Lara both online, larabriden.com, Instagram at Lara Briden, and also where you can find her best-selling books. Before we crack on into this interview, though, I would like to remind you that the best way to support this podcast is to hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast listening platform. That increases the visibility of Wikipedia and amongst literally thousands of other podcasts out there, so more people get to hear from experts that I have on the show, like Lara. All right, team, enjoy this conversation. Dr. Lara Briden, thanks for joining me this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's so great to see you again. Not in person this time, but we're actually not that far apart in real life. We're
I know.
Both on the South Island, at least.
Yes, and you got a really good sort of tour of my dad's lounge, which is my childhood lounge, which has not changed in other than the increasing amount of sort of vinyl and books. It hasn't changed in like 40 years, which is crazy. Lara, I wanted us to chat this morning, and you were really open to it, which was really awesome, about a topic which has been on my mind and just at varying points across, particularly this year, for whatever reason. And you had a post up on Instagram this week, and it was just this really beautiful tile. You do a great job of your social posts, by the way. And it was really simple, and I'm pretty sure you said, maybe you're okay. Mm-hmm. And I read it, and it was a really simple message, basically just talking about whether or not we are so focused on optimizing our health for some of us, or identifying with our health, that actually it's not creating problems, but actually just maybe we're okay. Can you just sort of talk to me about the genesis of that, and then we'll just run on with wherever the conversation goes?
Yeah, let's explore it today. And yeah, I'm curious who's listening. I mean, I think I even said off air, like probably a lot of your audience, so people listening today probably are health optimizers and tracking and Yeah, so there can be different reasons for that. I mean, I think a lot of it comes to, we'll explore what it can be. I mean, I think it can be fine to do that as long as it's not creating anxiety or coming from a place of anxiety or fear. So, I mean, I'm not a tracker, so this is probably quite a good contrast for your audience. Like, I don't optimize or track or anything, although, as you know, I'm reasonably active, but I come at it from quite a different place. So this is partly about personality type and also an exploration of if and when it is coming from or feeding anxiety.
And I also think, anyone reading your post or people listening to the podcast or who might follow me or you, I think we're almost more likely to attract people who not necessarily might not be about tracking. It might be just about other aspects of health that we really do identify with and really want to explore and spend a lot of our time trying to unravel like it's a problem.
Well, and I'll post also my post this week was sort of a commentary also on not just what's happening potentially in people's own lives, but what's happening on social media. So, I mean, I opened the caption, like, if you follow a lot of health accounts, things could be getting a little out of hand. So, I mean, there has been a burgeoning of health accounts. Full stop, just across all areas. I mean, obviously, we'll have to touch on a little bit, like there's been an explosion of health advice in perimenopause specifically. And my observation online and also with my patients who are now coming to me in quite a fearful state of mind around that, which even 5 years ago, even 2 or 3 years ago, was not like that. So there is, my post was partly a commentary about, okay, maybe it's time to unplug from some of, like, basically bluntly, unfollow some health accounts. And as I say it, that could mean mine. So, I'm not excluding myself from, because I'm a health influencer as well. But there is, I mean, I'm sure if you spend any time, especially on Instagram, like, you just, every which way you turn, there's like, well, do this, do this. What about this? There's this red flag and this sign in your health and your cortisol and you have to optimize this. And it's like exhausting. It's exhausting for me and overwhelming for me. And I obviously have, a fairly good foundation in, like, framework for thinking about health. But, like, I'm just imagining people who are trying to figure out, trying to figure out how to feel better or have a bit more energy. And suddenly they've got a to-do list of like 100 different things to try and work on. And yeah, and then I guess my main objection to all of that is then where do these people then find time to live their lives? This is our life. I mean, life is not a never ending, self-improvement project of health. At least that's not how I, see it. So yeah, we can explore. So should we talk first about the legitimate, like, sports people? Like, so, I mean, through all of this, I like and I'm thinking, yes, no, I get, like, if some people, if a sport and you might fall into this category, like, if there's certain, physical activities that are quite paramount in your life, then I get that, it makes sense to put a lot of training or attention towards that. What do you say? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not like the point of your post or this conversation is to discourage people from thinking about health or from being interested in it. But it's when you sort of tip that line from it being a healthy curiosity that you want to explore and just to, what can you do which actually will ultimately improve your life, but without, I guess, hysteria or neuroses around it, versus actually getting anxious and overwhelmed by all these things you now have to do in order to be a healthy, functioning 45-year-old woman or something.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of, like, historically and part of this is, I said, values. So through my clinical practice of whatever it is, 30 years now, a lot of my approach was, okay, let's get you, get your period sorted. So I'll give the example of, on how on some hands I have quite, like, on one hand, I have quite a high expectation for certain aspects of health. But on the other hand, I sort of feel like people can be good enough and just get on with their lives. So I just released a podcast actually about irregular periods. So I'll just use that as an example because, I mean, I have set quite a high bar for periods. I think they should fall into the, a period coming every 21 to 45 days. It should be ovulatory. Of course, we've just immediately defaulted to my area of periods, but I feel like, So, that's legitimate. So that's a barometer of health. If your period should come, it should be ovulatory. It should be ovulating regularly, and falling into that timing roughly. It doesn't have to be 28 days though. I'll circle back to that. And not painful, not distressing in any way. Certainly I'm in the camp where I don't think our bodily functions should be distressing to, like, causing symptoms. Like, that would go for digestion as well. Like, if there's serious digestive symptoms or period symptoms, then yes, like, find a solution. But then through the decades with my patients, like, once they've achieved that, and it's going to require some, eating well to maintain that, and staying fully nourished, or whatever they have to do to kind of maintain that. But then I'm like, okay, now go live your life. Like enjoy, like, embrace your life. Like, your periods are there. They're solid. My experience with periods, even if you've come from a place of irregular periods, once you get them going, as long as you're sort of reasonably healthy, they just keep going. Like, you get the ball rolling, and they're quite solid. They can be quite solid. So that's my, okay, now go live your life, and circle back if you need more help in the future. But then on the other end of that, on the topic of periods, as an example, would be, at different times, it's been proposed by people. It's like, oh, you should ovulate with the full moon. And, I'm like, I remember seeing that, years ago, and thinking that's too much pressure on women, because a lot of women are just not going to ovulate with the full moon. We could sort of debate whether the lunar cycle has any legitimate, that's a topic for another day. I'm sort of in I think the moon cycle potentially does affect us to some degree, but I guess I could go on record. I'm not convinced that it, regulates the menstrual cycle. And I feel like, do you see what I'm going with this? Like, that's a lot of extra pressure.
Yes.
And then you'd get, like, I remember, this is years ago now, but like, seeing women like, oh no, I don't ovulate with the moon. Like, what does that mean about me? Like, now I've got one other, I'm just like, okay, whoa, like, pull the reins here. This is like, you don't have to ovulate with the full moon. Like, just, you're ovulating most cycles in the year. Like, you're doing well. You can now, as I said in the post, you can now, like, join a singing group, or like get a master's degree, or, spend time with your family, or like all the things that life is for, and not be spinning our wheels, kind of spiraling, trying to optimize, I would say trying to optimize aspects of our body that I don't think need to be optimized. I guess it sort of depends, that sort of whole concept of optimization. It's like, well, that's values related too. So,
well, can I give you an example just from my area, which my mind immediately went to when I saw your post, which is probably why I was thinking about it and have thinking about the concept. So it is different. It's in fat loss. It's in building muscle. It's in sort of optimizing muscle mass and the benefits of that. And I have a client, and she's amazing, and she has, through my program, she's reduced body fat down to a place where she feels really happy. She's been maintaining this for 10 weeks now. She's, really back into the gym, doing strength training, feeling good enough to doing HIIT training. And from there, she's like, well, now I need to just build more muscle. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like, this is the process with which, if you really want to build muscle from this wonderful place that you've now at, then you need to do a series of sort of XYZ. And I talked her through what it was, which was, essentially eating in a little bit of a surplus, training optimally, like 3 to 4 times in the gym a week, maybe, just went through what that training should look like. And then I said, so why do you want to build more muscle?
Right.
Why don't you just be happy with where you are now? And she said, well, more muscle is, the thing that we should be aiming for. And this is when I'm like, well, when is enough actually? Like, is it not just wonderful that you're in this place where you're maintaining your weight, you're in the gym, you're working hard, and you're making the most of what you've got, rather than like trying to work towards something which is just yet another project, yet another thing to do?
It's a really good question. How much muscle is enough? Obviously, And but the muscle is a really good example. Actually, let's just, I mean, I'm sure people listening, there's, muscle experts in the audience that will have different opinions. I mean, if you're muscle building, like for competition or something, like that's obviously a different scenario. If you're, I mean, I guess I might use myself as an example. I mean, obviously we don't want sarcopenia, and especially like, I think a lot of this does come from the messaging, and it's real. I get it. Like after 50, I'm after 50, after menopause, the muscle is going to be reduce. But my attitude is just, I don't think there is actually in my metabolism book, I did find a quote from an expert, like, well, what's the bare minimum you have to do for like, that'd be like, so he's like, okay, twice a week with some things. I'm like, yeah, I'm currently kind of obviously by staying active generally, you can maintain some muscle, and then a little bit of strength training. Like, what is the bare minimum to not go down the path to sarcopenia? That's sort of so I think part of the problem in health is all of us who are health messaging, we're talking to lots of different people, and they're in all sorts of different starting places. So yes, there might be people who really have lost a significant amount of muscle, and then it's legitimate. Like, okay, you need to build some back. That makes sense. But like the client that you just talked about, she's already probably got a fair bit of muscle. She's not in sarcopenia.
Yes.
So how much more does she
actually need? I know. And this is what, and I think about this a lot for myself as well, Lara, because, I've always strength trained, and probably only in the last 2 years have strength trained like I meant it. Equally, I'm not discounting all of the work that I've done before. I just sort of thought, maybe I do just push myself a little bit more in the gym, and let's just see what happens. Not spending any more time in there necessarily, or not really even changing up my exercise or what I do that much. But I'm like, well, I was thinking for a while, maybe I do actually need to build more muscle. I'm like, I don't think I do. I just need the muscle that I've got to sort of just function well, and I need to protect sort of what I've got. And I feel like, and yes, we absolutely lose muscle, as we age, and menopause accelerates that. But what does that acceleration mean? Like, I feel like the average woman who goes to the gym might hear those words and think, my God, now I'm just, I'm running out of time. I'm fighting this losing battle. Like this is, like you mentioned in one of our back and forths about hysteria. And I don't think it's a hysteria, but it is this real fear, because you used it in a different context. But I saw that word and thought about how women who I speak to are, who are very fearful that they're twice a week in the gym and their running is in fact detrimental, or not enough to fight this sort of like the doom and gloom of muscle mass loss.
Well, the doom and gloom is a big part of it. So this goes back to the sheer abundance of health messaging that's out there right now. A lot of it is very fear-based. And I get that's a motivator to put the fear of God into people, basically. It's like, if you don't, if you don't do these things, you're going to age more quickly. You're going to get dementia. It's all very frightening. And I guess even for all of us that are health influencers and communicators right now, like, the two of us and people listening, it's about, can we find ways to convey this information in a way that's empowering and not fear-based? But some people, I actually had a guy comment on one of my social media posts. I was trying to push back on the fear-based messaging around perimenopause, and he's like, no, it's good. This fear motivates, shame. He even was talking about how shame motivates. It's like, that's not the kind of motivation I want to be doing, because there is an aspect of shame for this too, especially around as soon as you get into around any aspect of health, actually, not just, I was going to say, as soon as you get into the, area of body shape and size and fitness, like shame reactions kick in for everyone, but for women in particular, I would think. But even around, menstrual health, it's like, why can't I, I feel so bad. Why can't I be ovulating on the full moon like everybody else? I'll just say again, not most people are not ovulating on the full moon. So I don't know why I keep coming back to that one, but I just remember thinking, okay, that's an example of this is too far.
And actually, look, this is a bit of a tangent, but I really have to ask, like, if this was the case, surely every woman's menstrual cycle would be synced and everyone would be having a period around you at around the same time. Like, I mean, that just can't possibly, I'm not sure.
People have tried to look at it, and I mean, I don't think, anyway, we could, I could be wrong. I mean, this is the thing with any of these things, right? We could be wrong. Maybe the moon does have more of an effect than I thought. But again, it's to do with starting place. Like, a lot of the people I'm trying to reach they're miles from that. Like, they're potentially like have been on the pill, had their ovulation suppressed for 15 years and are just trying to get any kind of ovulation going. So, that's it. Yeah.
And I almost want to, I'm not going to get sidetracked, don't worry. But one thing I will say though about the moon is my sleep is always pretty rubbish around the moon. Like,
well, and there is research into
some sort of effect.
It does have some impact. Yes. So I certainly would not discount that entirely.
Yeah. However, like, to your point, like, it doesn't seem. Anyway, yeah, I can understand why you're not so bought into the theory as others might be.
Right. So, and I mean, the other part of this, and just to sort of name it, is, some people are coming at health. I do think, and this would be for individuals to just have an honest conversation with themselves. If they do have a history of eating disorder or disordered eating, or because we do know that a phenomenon that is quite common is sort of to be locked into one version of disordered eating and then kind of switch gears to, I'm not restricting to be skinny now. I'm like, restricting for a different reason. And this is something, I guess, even as I'm bringing it up, I obviously through the decades, trying to advise people about diet, I'm sure I have, potentially contributed to some people's anxiety around being fearful around food. It just goes with the territory, because it's all things are true at the same time. It is true that certain types of foods are inflammatory for people, and some, more for some people than for others. And food can be harmful. That's true. At the same time as, being very fearful of food is also harmful and can just kind of spread through. Certainly what I've seen with some patients, it just kind of starts to take a grip onto everything and just have this real, as soon as there's basically my warning sign with when I'm working one-on-one with people, as soon as there's like a rigidity around it and like a fearfulness around the decisions, then I know, okay, so this is something else. There's another layer here that is not helpful for
100%.
long-term health. It should be joyful, but keep going. Yes. Yep.
No, I completely agree with that, Lara. And I think it's an interesting tension between us as wanting to communicate healthful messages to be helpful for people, right? And we spend a lot of our time trying to curate the message to be helpful, but also not to, and nowadays I'm much more cognizant of this now than I was like 10 years ago. I look at things that I wrote 10 years ago and went, oh my God, I cannot believe that I put that out there on social media,
Same.
But yeah. There is that, like, it's like, so we do have to be mindful of what we've put out. But then on the flip side, particularly in nutrition that I've witnessed, which I think could lead to messaging which might not be helpful for some people, is that there's almost this dilution of what health is from a nutrition side. So there are people who have, who are nutritionists and dietitians who are up there going, there aren't any good or bad foods. And of course you can eat what, there's that sort of messaging as well, which I try to push back on as well, because I feel like, and part of the explanation for that is that people sort of embody the message of good and bad foods and think that what they're hearing is, if I eat these foods then I'm a good or a bad person. They're sort of like, they're identifying with the sort of the act of eating it. And I'm like, let's be frank, there are bad food. Like I do think that there are bad foods out there that aren't even, shouldn't even be categorized as food. And I don't think it's very helpful for nutritionists to say 3 cheese sandwiches in a day would fit most of your micros and macros. And I've seen actual dietitians write posts saying that you could have a balanced diet and eat 3 cheese sandwiches and that's all you eat. Like, it's crazy stuff.
I think so much of what's out there, this is broader as well. Like, you'll have messaging that's trying to combat another kind of messaging. So there's like these battles going on that sort of, and without the context, I think for people dropping into that, they're not really. So yeah, you do get this, and I've talked about that in my books too, this pushing back on the disordered eating by saying there are no good or bad foods. Like, there's just food, like, just eat. And obviously that's been said for a certain reason to push back on this moralizing around food, which I get that. But at the same time, it's, clearly not true that any food is fine. I mean, the lens, I always put it through. So my guiding light and guiding principle, which I'm just I only now, like 30 years in, I realize how important this has been to me, is I'm a biologist background, and seeing everything through the lens of biology and evolutionary, like that we're animals, basically. Yeah. So if you put it through that lens, there are certain foods, and people could debate what those are, but there's certain foods that are suitable for Homo sapiens and foods that are not. And I guess we're actually very, from that lens, I mean, Homo sapiens, we're quite remarkable in terms of, compared to a lot of other animals, in that we do eat just a huge variety of things. And through the eons, like ages, we have eaten just like a huge variety of macros and variety of items. And we'll basically almost eat anything because we're kind of ravenous in that way. But obviously the ultra processed food it's not suitable for any biological creature, really. The example I was given in my books is like, would you feed this to your, your pet or you're like an animal that you're trying to, so, but to your point, there's a lot of these sort of quite strong messaging that's attempting to push back on other messaging. And there's this, battle of wills going on that individuals are being caught up in. And I guess that's partly what my post was about is, maybe I feel like saying one takeaway could be to people, if you're hearing very strongly worded sort of messaging, that's probably not for you. That's about a longer standing, debate that's been going on. Like just to try to put that in context as well. I mean, I give another example. This is quite relevant, is as of 2025, so we're recording this end of 2025, we've just come through about 24 months of very strong messaging around menopausal hormone therapy and around like very strong messaging, which has just been a little bewildering, and like overstated claims that estrogen can categorically prevent dementia, which is not true. There's no evidence for that at this point. Like really strong claims I have been a little distressed about that, because I feel like that is creating a lot of fear. I can tell you that. Like, women are very now frightened too. What, like, almost paralyzed. What do you do when you hit 45? But that has been, and like it's been openly admitted by some of the people influencers I've talked to. Well, they're just trying to combat the old Women's Health Initiative. Like also fear, like very fearful messaging that hormone therapy is not safe. So there's these two, like, you know what I mean by battle? Like there's these two, it's so, and women are being caught in the middle. And this is in the post that we're talking about. I did say, or maybe I did another one a few days later where I'm like, maybe it's okay to just trust your instincts on some of these. Maybe this is also about, the phrase sort of locus of control. Like, so maybe like I did a second post following up on that one, which was like, for every expert, there's an equal and opposite expert.
Yes,
so
I
like for
that,
every
like
opinion
that.
out there, you'll find an opposing opinion. And, I know, I know it can be tough, but maybe sometimes we just have to put that through our own personal filter of, how does this land with me? And like, what do I really need? And understanding that not every individual can become an expert in the field. I saw this other funny comment from someone saying, who knew that being in perimenopause means you have to instantly become a biochemist and a full like endocrinologist and know all the ins and outs of hormones and all the dosing and just to get by. It's like, you shouldn't have to do that either. Obviously, you shouldn't have to do like a crash course in everything. But at the end of the day, I think it is important to understand that the experts don't have all the answers. They don't. I mean, that's a takeaway too. Like, there's no expert that has all the answers. And that would go for me as well. And like, so it's, I mean, how would you sort of frame that? I mean, I think people do have to just sort of take the information, feel what kind of lands with them, maybe combine that with other information they've had. And then at the end of the day, just say, okay, so what part of this serves me? Like, what do I actually, need from this? And filter that through your own goals in life. And like, so again, just circling back to, if you are a serious athlete and, training for, serious events or have, real, sports goals in mind, then fine. But if you're just, a person who's trying to ward off sarcopenia and like, make time for the other things in your life, then that's a different, then you need different information. Does that make sense?
I agree with you. And particularly within the whole sort of perimenopause menopause space, you're right, there are a lot of loud voices out there, and the two obvious, the interesting ones, and one of them I know, so Stacey I know well, and I think her messaging has been wonderful for actually bringing attention to the idea that actually women should focus on, there are things which can be super helpful for you as you age to be as healthy as possible. And her message is completely not aligned with the likes of Dr. Mindy Peltz, who for a long time was about, fasting for women and as being a health panacea almost. But then to your point, like these are, these women have the intention of the audience that they're talking to are very different.
Yes.
But we're all in the same space. And I think this is this explosion of information availability. So with podcasts, with social media, with newsletters, with, books and courses, like you can get your information from almost, like the same information is out there, and you're sort of having to filter it through, to your point, what it is that you need. And so it's not that anyone is incorrect. It's just that the message is not for everyone, even though because these people have huge audiences, the whole population is sort of getting it.
That's a really good point. I mean, just if just as a maybe helpful check is as people go forward and they're absorbing information or hearing messages, it's like, who is this for actually? Who is this targeting? And I would acknowledge, I mean, some of the advice or, research around intermittent fasting. I mean, that's for a certain group of people who really potentially are in the grip of, something like sort of more advanced insulin resistance. And I think, which is quite different from a very active athlete. Or so, I mean, there's such different places, and perhaps that can help a little bit. I mean, there's obviously not one answer through all of this. It does bring it back to, I was just thinking, like that internal locus of control, just being able to think, okay, so what serves me here and what isn't for me? Like which parts of this messaging actually isn't about me, and being able to just say, okay, close the door on that. That doesn't involve me. And and it's tricky because it's always through the background of like our own personal anxieties and so I'll give another example, just more concrete example. So my Achilles heel, or like my weak spot through my years, like has been sleep. So I've just always had this narrative, like I'm not a good sleeper. And, and I unfortunately went through a lot of years of kind of comparing my sleep to other people. So I had as my benchmark. So my husband he seriously does need like 9 hours. That's just sleep is one of those things where a lot of it's genetic. we need different amounts of sleep. I think that's pretty clear in the research. People biologically, to be healthy, there's not one size fits all amount of sleep. And so for years I was like comparing, it's like, oh, I'm such a terrible sleeper. I'm not sleeping like the 9 hours that he is. And finally, like one day the penny dropped. I'm like, wait a minute, like maybe, I'm just a different person. Like maybe, I need some. And so maybe a lot of this, thinking sleep is this big problem I have to solve. Some of that was just my own anxieties around it. I'm hoping that's a good illustrative example. That could apply to other things.
No, I totally agree with that. Lara, how much of the peptide story, or this sort of there's been an explosion in peptides over the last year, at least in my social media feed. Have you, maybe we're a little bit protected because in New Zealand and maybe Australia, they're not so widely available, but it feels like a lot of people, like a lot of accounts, which I don't necessarily follow, but they're just in my feed, is like, peptides are the panacea in as you're heading to your doctor to get your estradiol patch or whatever, you need to pick up some, I don't know, GLP or something like that, which, will help with the inflammation of menopause and all of these things that you're also experiencing is because you don't have a deficit of peptides, but these can really help. Like, are you noticing that?
Yeah, well, to some degree, I think it's a little bit maybe outside of, to be honest, I will admit something. I don't follow a lot of health accounts and I don't listen to a lot of health. My podcast preferences are, I listen to your podcast sometimes, but I generally like history podcasts and like biology, sciencey podcasts. So I'm not fully up to speed necessarily with the current trends, but I'll just speak a little to peptides because I'm finding it more than anything. I'm just finding it as a curious, how would I frame this? Like another sort of narrative in health. And I mean, because I've been doing this for so long, every 5 to 10 years, obviously there's a new kind of narrative that takes hold. If anyone's interested in like history of medicine and that's a whole other, that is relevant to today's conversation, but like so much of our understanding of health is a combination between our biology and, real symptoms being kind of fed through whatever narrative is the current thing. And it's like this feedback loop gets set up too with the narrative. So around peptides, I think there's a lot of power in the word itself. Like peptide, I was actually had a bit of a conversation with AI about this. Like, what is because peptides is actually a very broad term. So it obviously does, it just means obviously like a chain of amino acids of a certain length. It does describe, we have many, many peptides in our own body, including some hormones, growth hormone and insulin and oxytocin are all and GLP-1 obviously are peptide hormones. So then you have, I've just been trying to sort this through in my own brain. So then you have obviously some medications that are analogs of those hormones or peptide-based medications, but it's a huge variety of things. Like it's not like, how do I say this? Like biologically, through my lens as a biologist, peptides aren't there's no unifying thing that ties them together apart from the size, like the actual molecule size that they are. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so they're not a group, like they're very broad. So, and some of the peptides are, as far as I can tell, some of the ones that are being used or taken as a supplement almost, which I find interesting through my sort of background of naturopathic medicine, but they're medicines. Like a lot of them are, they're medicines basically. Like they're not derived from, as far as I can tell. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not pro or anti them. I'm more just like a head scratching moment of like, okay, what's going on? And also some of the fact that the GLP-1 medications work so well, or potentially work so well, whether you're microdosing them or, that's obviously a bigger conversation, but the efficacy and intriguing nature of the GLP-1 medications, to me anyway, unless I'm missing something, I don't see how that conveys like efficacy to the category of peptides in general, right? Like they're all different. All the different peptides are their own thing would be I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I'm actually finding the whole thing very puzzling, but I know it's popular. And so obviously, you could, in the show notes, you can put, if you've had conversations with experts on this,
the different perspectives.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it from like in our conversation about what it takes to be healthy and what a requirement, or how it's fixed a certain problem, and then what a bonus, I've now lost 15 pounds. Like I've seen like just health and previous health people who are in the health space who maybe moved on from the health space because they got sick of, they almost reached that point where they were just saturated with partly their own messaging, which they then sort of switched, but then other people's expectations of what they say about health, and they're like, right, I'm out, like I am just going to move to pottery and do this completely other different thing, and actually be anti-diet, and which is no problem, anti-diet and anti anything to do with it, have then sort of now shifted into the space of, well, I realized the GLP-1 could help with my, anxious brain, or how I feel about food. And then I've, and now I'm finally myself again. And hey, look, I've lost 15 pounds. I find it is, this might be a tangent to our conversation, but I feel like it's all part of it. Like this sort of I'm not sure what I'm, like this, that it is a panacea for some people, for a couple of things related to what they might be experiencing. But
well, that's not new with medications, though. I'll just say, like this. And it's like it can help with this. It can help with this, and you get a set of steak knives with it. And it's like we're definitely. I mean, I'm not anti the GLP-1s at all. Like, and I do get that they have this, receptors on many cells, and I think they're interesting. Like I said, I think biologically it's super interesting, actually, all the effects they can have, but we are at the same time in a moment with them. And it does remind me, like, for what it's worth, like just back in the 90s. So I was like an early just naturopathic doctor in the mid 90s, just kind of getting started. And that's when SSRIs were first invented, basically, when they were first put out there. And I'm not saying they're the same type of medications, like they're obviously quite different from the GLP-1s in lots of ways, but there was a similar, like, they can do no wrong. Like, they are amazing. I just remember thinking, like, it was just like, oh, and they help with this and they help with this. And then I was like, even as a naturopath back then, I'm thinking, gosh, I should maybe take this. And I didn't have depression, but it's like, these sound really good. Like, they must just be really good for the brain somehow. It's just like this getting really caught up in, like, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be, I was just talking with a colleague, a very smart colleague of mine, about the GLP-1s, and, she prescribes them, and it's not like, I'm not anti them at all, but, there's going to be, just biologically, I'll just say, just both speaking through a lens of biology and through a lens of medical history, there's going to be a cost. They're not cost-free. Like, there's going to be, something. I mean, I think there will be. I mean, I think it depends on the individual, obviously, and the dose. And I get microdosing versus, but I mean, they work on the brain. They work on the reward system. So, you do sort of have to think, are they just tonics, for the brain, or is there going to potentially be, an eventual downside to having been on them? I'm just speculating. I'm more just kind of putting it in the framework of, I guess, just I do think medical history is quite interesting, just to zoom out a little bit and just realize whatever era people are in and whatever the thing that is like the thing at the time, everyone's into it. They're like, oh, there's no downside. I'm talking like, 100 years ago, it's like mercury is great for infections. Like, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, I know that's like an extreme example, but and then of course my area, which I do know a lot about, is contraceptive medications are amazing. Like, they clear up your skin, they regulate your period, which obviously they don't do. What could possibly go wrong? It's like, well, and I don't exclude like some of the natural treatments as well. I mean, there'd be an over enthusiasm for this. And, even just, I'm just giving another example from the natural health world. So, back in the 90s, it was like everybody had candida, or, there'd be like the narrative, whatever it is. And it's like, this explains everything. And if people are like, oh, my candida is making me anxious, and my candida, and then sort of later, like then 15 years later, it's like, oh, my MTHFR gene mutation is making me this way. And it's all about this. But then like 5 years later, everyone's just moved on, and it's like all under another umbrella. And it's like, this explains everything, and I just need the treatment. So, and again, I take people's symptoms very seriously, but through the lens of medical history, a lot of these symptoms, actually, there's a few more things I want to say about this. So a lot of, I'm not sleeping well. I gave my own example of sleep, my gut's a little, I feel sort of bloated sometimes. I've got heart palpitations, or I feel anxious, or, just all these are super common bodily sensations that through the ages, there have been different names for. And in every age, people were all in on that. Like, this explains, this current narrative that we're in explains everything. And obviously, looking back, they were all only ever approximations or some, pieces of the puzzle. And the other thing to say about that is, and this is actually really important, I think, when people are, both for practitioners listening and for people for their own health, just to understand that some people are just a lot more conscious of their bodily sensations than other people. And this is, this plays out in a lot of ways. So some people do notice I feel too hot, or I feel prickly, or I feel this, or like, and that's just a type of nervous system. It's more common in women compared to men, which is as a general approximation, but and then that kind of, if you're very sort of, there's words for it, which I don't know that, like off the top of my head, I can't remember the terms, but like if you're just super sort of aware of your bodily ins and outs every minute of the day, that's going to potentially contribute to health anxiety in the way that, people who just don't really think about that, or, notice that so much, don't have. Does that track with your, experience?
100%. And in fact, it's, and maybe in part it's not, but because I know that there are women who have absolutely sailed through menopause, out the other side, really didn't notice, there are a couple of things maybe popped up for them, but not really. And, there were no such problems. Whereas you then know other women who experience almost everything, to your point. And I wonder whether it helps that now there's, no, it's not helpful, where, there are 108 symptoms of perimenopause, which one do you have?
Well, I don't agree with that, for one thing, at all, like full stop, the 108 symptoms, that's not a thing. But I would just say, and this is like the feedback between the narrative and so if you think, I feel a little prickly, or like, and not to just diminish those as real symptoms. I was going to use the example of brain fog, which is a super common symptom, by the way, like super, super common, can be from iron deficiency, gut health. B12 deficiency, like, there's lots of, and I'm not saying people should just put up with symptoms either, but the feedback mechanism I'm talking about is, under a strong medical narrative, would be like, oh, I've got a little brain fog today. It's like, oh, that's my perimenopause. Oh, that means I'm going to get dementia. Oh, that means also I'm going to get like sarcopenia, and like, oh, okay, I must take, because it sort of spirals into this like, okay, so that must mean I need estrogen, and also I should do more strength training. And and again, not that estrogen and strength training are bad, but if it's coming from this like spiral of, oh, I think I'm, this is happening, and, feeding back through a strong narrative that everyone's going to get dementia without estrogen. I keep coming back to that because it just actually breaks my heart that that's out there as a thing. Like, and again, not to diminish dementia, and not even to diminish that there is, a signal in the research around menopause and estrogen and dementia. That's, again, we have to be able to, in our brains, hold things to be true at the same time. So it is true there's a signal coming from the research around that. I have thoughts around that as all around sort of recalibration and evolutionary mismatch, but it doesn't translate into this, but therefore every individual, must be like afraid if they don't take estrogen to like, it can be very destabilizing and unnecessary. And just in terms of the symptoms of menopause, so again, this would be some people are super conscious of just any bodily sensations will likely have more symptoms. But I knew things had gone really off the rails with the perimenopause conversation when someone commented, I've given this example a number of times, but like a few months ago in 2025, she said, okay, so, clearly I'm perimenopause, I'm 48, my periods are becoming further apart, sort of all very logical. She said, but I feel fine. Does that mean something's wrong with me? And I'm like, okay, no,
Yeah.
no. Like, let's back to the drawing board, because just again, with periods, with perimenopause, I will set the bar. Those should not be inherently symptomatic. They are not medical conditions. There's nothing about it. It should be entirely possible to go through those, like, menstrual cycles, regular menstrual cycles, and perimenopause without symptoms. I mean, that would be a reasonable expectation. At the same time, having some symptoms with them might be something quite serious, or it might just be, that signals from your body telling you, okay, you need more support in certain areas. Your nervous system needs more support, or whatever it is. And that's manifesting as symptoms associated with those hormonal transitions.
Yeah.
So,
Lara, I loved how you talked about, things having a moment, like, so the Candida had its moment, the SSRI was going to like sort of fix everything.
Yeah.
I think, like, if I'm just reflecting back on messaging over the years, gut related, everyone has a leaky gut, which I don't like, and I'm not discounting the importance of gut health, but does everyone, is this something everyone needs to be like sort of on, I don't know, like hyper vigilant on? And one other one, which I'm sure, like adrenal fatigue was all the rage.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. So yes. So through the ages, like broadly, depending on what, like the symptoms are probably all the same as they were like 500 years ago, still like not sleeping well, like, just all various things, headaches. And, these are symptoms humans get. And again, I'm not saying people should put up with them, but the explanation for them was the humors, or then, might have been like the stars, but like about the last 80 to 100 years, it's been around hormones and lots of like adrenal fatigue and estrogen dominance yeah, when you're kind of locked inside one of these narratives, I would also venture, I mean, I'm hesitant, but I will say also there's a lot of mental health. I mean, I would also kind of add ADHD to that. And I'm not saying it's not the symptoms aren't real, or, I mean, I'm obviously not an expert in mental health, but we are in a moment where these diagnoses, I mean, I guess the question again has to be, are they serving you? Like, how much is this serving you? So there's a book on this topic called The Age of Diagnosis by Suzanne O'Sullivan. I've probably talked to you about it before.
Yes,
It's had
I've read
quite
it.
a big,
Yeah.
Oh, you've read it now, right? So we can put that in the show notes. I mean, she has a great paragraph in there. And I would encourage people, like did you read, like the final chapter is the best chapter, because it's the like synthesis of everything that came before. But she talks about how like a diagnosis can be very empowering. It can be, oh, okay, this makes it sort of like, you can have that power of, okay, this makes sense. I'm not just a bad person. Like, I do, there are some things going on with my nervous system that sort of help to explain why I've, struggled with certain types of functioning compared to maybe my friends. And so she's like, that's great. And if a diagnosis is helpful if it points to ways to feel better. But she said, but sometimes that's not what's happening. And if a diagnosis just spirals down to just feeling more and more anxious about health, then it hasn't served you. And that would be true with adrenal fatigue and I know I think we have this even I'm thinking, well, I mean, there's legitimate medical diagnoses and then there's like the naturopathic ones. But I mean, honestly, through my broad arc and lens, I mean, I think some of the medical ones are just as wacky. Like the serotonin deficiency narrative is not a thing. Like, like I'm pretty confident in saying that. Like we are 40 years into that. And it's just, and I know the SSRIs, potentially like now they're saying, well, no, they work by different mechanisms. Like there's other ways that they're helping with GABA and fine. And they're helping mitochondrial health. And like I feel like every couple of years it's like, well, there's another thing that SSRIs do, which is fine, but sure. But we were all sold on the SSRI, like on the serotonin deficiency narrative for a long time. And
that hasn't borne out.
It's not a thing.
No. Yeah. It is interesting with that whole, because I really enjoyed reading that book actually, and they talk a lot about what the utility is of getting your genetics done to see what your risk of a certain thing is, and some quite serious health conditions, diseases, versus just knowing that you're at a predisposed risk for sort of XYZ. I'm not sure. And how is that going to sort of, if you can't do anything to change that, what does that mean for, I don't know, the 10, 15 years that you've got left before you start experiencing any of the complications maybe associated with it? Like you just live in fear for 10 to 15 years?
Well, she dissects that a bit, and she talks about some patients who just decide they don't want. I mean, this actually then feeds into, the conversation about medical screening generally and the complexities of that. And I guess one thing she really brings home in that book, and this could apply to a lot of things, and I'll just mention, mammogram screening and without going to, I don't remember if she has a section on that, but other people have written about this. Like, we have this on the one hand, we're like, as much information as possible. This ties into our broader conversation. It's like, with tracking and everything, it's like, surely on the one hand, you think, well, it's logical to just have as much information as possible, that's going to be helpful, but that's not how it plays out. And I would even factor in like a lot of the functional testing and getting all these numbers and all these values. It's like, what are you actually doing with that? Like, that's why I personally don't do a lot of functional testing. It's like, it's a lot of information coming at you and you don't, and the same would be true for some of the screenings. Like the science is not clear on what that means at the end of the day. Like, and then people are potentially acting on these numbers that they've been given or these results as soon as there are results on paper, it seems very important, right? Like you can't unsee that. Like you can't unsee it once it's there. So there is an argument in some of this, screening research is like, well, maybe we should just, stop looking for some of these things. And I would argue, I did a post recently about, I know we're kind of roping in a lot of things, but this is a broad concept that applies to a lot of things. Like I don't, with my patients, test estrogen and progesterone that much, even though estrogen and progesterone seem very important. They are, but testing them is tricky because they move around a lot. And even progesterone, the fun fact, this is crazy actually. It's on a 90-minute cycle and it fluctuates by 8 times.
That is crazy.
In 90 minutes.
That is crazy.
So a serum test could fluctuate by 8 times in 90 minutes. So unless you're doing like a blood draw every minute, you're like every 10 minutes or something. So like, it's like, so that's, and then, I think I'll just say like some of the sort of functional methods of testing hormones, have some built-in sort of uncertainties around some reasons potentially for falsely low levels. And I just feel like, I guess this is kind of more, again, this is a values-based thing. Like I don't collect a lot of numbers on myself. Because I am an anxious person. So I know that numbers would create anxiety. So this would be true. I mean, I think this could be true for hormone testing, potentially for some kinds of screening. But like back to my example of sleep, my main, which I'm happy to disclose, is like one of my main struggles. I have never tracked my sleep. Like that would be a disaster for me. Like I don't 100%. Need to know,
yes.
Like I don't need some app telling me that I only, like, I don't want to know. Like, I was like, I'm better off just, and I have, read some sleep experts, like your best test of sleep is how you feel in the morning and during the day. And, if you feel rested and don't have daytime sleepiness, then it's probably a pretty good sign that sleep quality was sufficient. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of I'm less as I become a more experienced clinician, I'm just less and less a fan of testing, which is not to say I never test. I mean, I do think some testing is important, of course, but it's not like the more testing, the better, or the more diagnoses, the better, because it really can create sort of a paralysis of,
Yeah. And it's like you and I have spoken a lot about this, about how I get like overly anxious on the screening. And I feel like as a woman, it's almost every 3 months you've got some sort of like noose hanging over your head. It's just about to drop when you've got like your pap smear, your further follow-up there, the mammogram you didn't schedule, the ultrasound, the appointment 6 weeks out to discuss those results. And so it's like your year, like particularly the older you get, it feels like your year is just sort of like blocked out by these. You might get a month reprieve from not thinking about these things, but then suddenly they're there. So it's certainly unhelpful for me from that perspective. And interesting on the tracking, Lara. So things which I love to track are my steps, because I get a thrill at getting a step count. Yep. I also like to, when I run, I like to know what my pace is. I don't know why, because it just seems to be getting worse as I get older. But also I like to know how long I run for and how many kilometers like that. Even though I would know that stuff without tracking, I like to hit start and stop on my watch. But I mean, I love the idea of tracking HRV and not sleep. I've never been a big fan of the sleep thing. I've just thought, to your point, like, how do I feel in the morning? I don't need something telling me how I've slept. I already know how I sleep. But I'm very I'm probably more minimalist than maybe you might expect of me, or others might expect of me. And part of it is my slight cannot be bothered. And also, if I had that data, I don't think I'd act on it. Like, it wouldn't, like, I'm not going to likely change a lot of what I'm doing now. In the face of this data, I'm likely not going to start doing other things. It depends on how I feel and what I'm experiencing. That would change how I might sort of, like some of my behaviors, but I wouldn't necessarily change it on data if I was feeling, if I didn't think I was feeling any different.
I think there's a different kind of right amount for every person, isn't there? Like how much. So for some people, again, I'm not a tracker at all, but like I also acknowledge that some people enjoy it. And I think for some people, is it kind of a gamifying of like it just makes it more fun to like get, and I can understand that. Like but I see that tracks with me too. Like things like Duolingo, the streaks and stuff. Like just the way I am, for whatever reason, I always rebelled against that. I could break my streaks. It's like, I don't want to have a streak. Like, I don't want to be like a slave to your like stupid little like icons that you're giving me for streaks. Like, I'm out. Like, I'm just doing this to actually learn the language. I don't want all the gamifying. But I mean, that doesn't mean, I get that people enjoy it, and that's totally valid. And also like even steps. So for me, and again, I think it's fine to track steps. A lot of my patients track steps. I think it seems a totally reasonable thing. I personally don't, mainly because I love walking. Like walking is, like I said in my metabolism book, it's almost sacred for me. Like, so walking is a thing, and especially like walking up hills. And like, so I don't like, for me, tracking would,
take away.
Yes, it would diminish the kind of beauty of it. It would sort of minimize it, would like kind of make it about numbers, which for me would just not fit at all. But the thing I do like to track sometimes when I'm hiking in the mountains, or not track, but know is altitude or elevation. I will be like, oh, was that like a 700-meter climb? Or, that's interesting to me, just from a topography, like size of the mountain, like that lens, rather than, how many flights did I climb? It's not a fitness thing for me. It's always just more a landscape interest. Like, it's kind of like a spatial thing. So, people, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, you're so right. People are so different, aren't they? Because I absolutely love, as you know, hiking, running, jogging, being out there as well. But then at the end of it, when I'm like sitting at the pub and having a beer and having whatever, I love to look at my watch and go, okay, so what did that all equate to? Like, it's all part of that experience. And of course, there was a time in my life when I loved all of that stuff and this technology wasn't available, and it was not like I enjoyed that less, but it almost enhances my sort of enjoyment. And maybe part of it is because it's more than just me at this point, because then I've got it on Strava, which is the app, and then all my friends can see, and then I get kudos from my friends.
That's fun. That's valid. I think another thing that comes into this, just thinking about how different we are on this, and we're like, you and I are quite similar in a lot of ways, but like we have different, obviously, experiences of that sort of tracking, which is fine. So it just kind of brings me to another point, which I think might help people when they're trying to filter through all the information that's out there. It's a very human and normal thing, I think, for health influencers, whatever their qualification, like even I see doctors even doing this, like when they found something that works for them, it's like they're evangelists for, well, I want all of you to have the benefits of what worked for me. But I mean, it's cliche, but like there isn't a one size fits all. And so I'll just give another example. Like, for some people in my clinical experience, this is just a very specific example, but like avoiding cow's dairy is transformative and like can eliminate period pain. And like, but that doesn't mean every single like that doesn't mean that's a one size fits all for everybody, right? And I think it does help. And I guess when people are following influencers, it does help to know if they're seeing a patient population, if they've had an opportunity to see how this works in lots of different people. Because I think I could just state categorically that anyone who has worked with a large number of clients will start to have built in this just deep knowledge that there's not a one size fits all. And that's why I would never, like in my work, like my husband's always trying to prompt me into like, share what you ate for lunch, like put a photo. It's like, I mean, part of it's laziness because I just don't like feel like taking, I know you do. So this is fine. This is another way we're different. Like I just never feel like taking pictures. I want to eat my lunch. I don't really want to take a picture of it. But also, I don't want my followers to think, oh, this is what Lara does, so this is what I should do too. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some basic principles. I mean, I do eat. I mean, here's a basic principle that I think that I do that I'd like other people to also do. Cook at home. Cook with whole food ingredients as much as possible. I do feel like that's a bit of a deal breaker, like a really important thing do you agree with that? Would you say most of your experts that you've interviewed I think there are some in the Venn diagrams of all the different pieces of advice. This is another good way to filter through. I mean, when you get people from very different opinions all agreeing on certain things, then those certain things are definitely the thing. So I think cook at home as much as possible with whole food ingredients. And then like you can get into the weeds as to what exactly those ingredients should be. Now I'm just giving a bit of blanket advice, but I would say a little bit of animal product in there is pretty important for health. But then in terms of what macro proportion, I mean, like there's not a one size fits all. And then, all the different types of advice on exercise, and even the fact that I'm not really a keen, fitness person. Like most people will agree, like moving your body and maintaining some amount of muscle is important. So there's a few areas where everyone agrees, and I think those are good starting places.
No, I agree. And I also think, Lara, I really love the concept of just the N equals 1, like, and you mentioned this, like, what are you listening to? What are you taking on board? And are you trying it out to see whether it fits? And maybe you don't even need to try it out. Maybe you just need to sort of assess it against the sort of your own lived experience. And like, does that make sense for you and what you know about yourself? Because we so often give away our, almost we don't value about our own experience nearly as much as what maybe an expert might say about us, even if they don't even know us.
Absolutely. This is which is not new. It's very human. I mean, of course we're going to want to trust the experts. I mean, of course we do, because we can't all have PhDs. Like, we can't all sort of know but at the end of the day, it does have to be kind of filtered through. Does this make sense for me in an honest way, and a way that's not, because we have to consider too through that sometimes we have, sometimes we have sort of self-destructive narratives about our health that have taken hold. And so I guess, and that might, I'm talking about like sort of eating, disordered eating and eating disorders, or in that case, there has to be, it's harder to be honest with yourself, I think, about, when there's something like that happening. But it's and also it's actually just crazy how many different, if you just really objectively think about it, like how many different opinions about health there are. And I guess there are different opinions about politics and almost any issue. You're just going to get like, and also I guess I would say the other guiding principle that might help people, I don't know if you think if this is fair or not, but I would say the angrier an expert seems about it and the more defensive they seem about whatever it is that they've dug in on, the more cautious you should be around that. Do you agree? Like, I feel like people are really confident in, like, they're not going to be defensive about it.
I agree. And I also feel like and I've heard this so often, and I feel like you and I probably do like a good job of this, is that, we're open to changing our mind in the face of new information, and to your point, we know that we're not going to know everything. So actually being open about that, and also not being so absolute in the way that you think about things or talk about things. I think these are other good qualities that people who share information, that people should look for in the people they're listening to, actually.
Yeah, that's a guideline. Like, if the person seems pretty relaxed in their view and not super defensive about it, that's probably going to be information that, especially if it's landing, feeling good and landing well.
Yeah, that's true. And so, Lara, just to finish up, you've shared some really good guiding principles.
I hope so.
Yeah. And I guess I guess for us, it's like, I think a conversation like this is really helpful, because sometimes, you find yourself with someone saying something and you're like, I need to address this point that this other person has said, because it's, so I find it's a good opportunity for me to reflect and catch myself before I'm sort of the opposite of what I'm trying to like come up against sometimes.
Well, that's interesting. We'll finish on this, because I think partly maybe what's coming through, it's maybe my opportunity to confess this. I do have a streak of laziness that my husband has observed, because like people who don't know me as well say, you're like, you work so hard. He's like, does she though? Like, she's like,
yeah, I appreciate that.
And so just in that regard, like, I do not have the energy to debate people. So I will so my strategy, because I also don't like seeing people, I don't like seeing information on social media that I don't agree with. I don't love that process. I don't like, why did they say, like, I saw someone just the other day saying, everyone, in your 30s, you should get this baseline estrogen and progesterone, because that'll give you information I'm like, it won't. Like, that's not going to help you in your 40s. Like, I'm sorry, but again, just to come back to you actually are not going to learn that much from estrogen and progesterone testing. There's other things you can learn from, like, tracking, knowing whether you ovulate. Anyway, that's another topic. But like, so honestly, this is bad, but like if I've notice an account that is just saying things that I think are just completely wrong, I just mute them. Yeah. So I don't have to see them, which is like really bad. Because I guess that is also confessing that maybe I'm not allowing myself to be challenged, which it's laziness if that's the case. But yes, I mean, I think, yes, we should, as influencers and experts out there, we should be able to accept, criticism. And I think I do in my comment sections. Like, people will say, I don't agree with that, which is not fun, but sometimes they have totally valid points. So I think, and actually one comment on that, like when people chime in, I'm a lot more willing to kind of listen to them if they're just like, trying to genuinely explain why they think what I've said is wrong. Then I'll just, like a word that gets put out there a lot right now is, oh, you're spreading disinformation. I'm like, as soon as someone uses those terms, I'm like, just because what I'm saying is different than what you've heard from another expert doesn't immediately designate it as disinformation or misinformation. I really wish those terms had never come in. And I get that there is disinformation out there in the world, but like, a genuine like clinician or expert who's trying to share his or her opinion that is different from what you've heard before is not automatically disinformation. No. Would you agree?
And I completely agree with that. And I will say, Lara, that I don't think that you need to worry that you're not putting yourself in the face of challenge. Because there is, challenge, but also you're constantly learning. You're on PubMed, you're in the science. It's not like just because you're out there on social media, you're not sort of leaving yourself open to attacks. I don't think that means that you're not open to you're not, willing to be challenged. And yeah, I agree with you on that. Actually, what concerns me more, not concerns, but like, why is there disinformation and misinformation? Why is there not when is disinformation actually?
Because I was investigating. Well, I mean, I don't know. I had a reporter kind of trying to interview. Anyway, so it was mainly around because the thing I've been most controversial about in my career has been criticism of hormonal birth control, which in some parts of the world is more politically charged than here in New Zealand. I mean, I think that's not, for reasons that I don't have to explain. But like, I had a reporter, kind of mainstream reporter, sort of investigating me or I eventually did give her an interview, and her beat is, disinformation expert. So she had designated me as a disinformation. So misinformation is just saying the wrong thing. Disinformation is, saying the wrong thing intentionally, apparently, like knowing it's wrong, but putting it out there anyway. Yeah. So that was very hurtful that she thought that about my critiques. But anyway, I just quickly share with you because interviews are interesting, because I did agree to give her an interview, and she ended up not using anything I said in her articles, which was quite interesting. But she, my husband's like, right. He said, okay, so, record it, make her and ask her to send you the full recording. So she can't take anything out of context, which she did. Actually, she sent me the full video recording like this. And he was sitting off. He's not doing that now, but he was sitting off camera. So listening to the whole thing, both sides. And he said, if it starts going off the rails, I'm going to just close your computer and not let you say anything bad. But I like to think, this is the other thing about health influencers. And just in closing, we can talk about this, being an expert, writing books, putting out podcasts like you do. As soon as you start putting out content, there are lots of opportunities to get things wrong. And it's not a pleasant experience. And I think people can probably think back of all the influencers they follow, all the experts, almost without exception, there's going to be someone who on occasion got something wrong. And it's just par for the course. It's just always going to happen. And it's both a little bit nerve-wracking for the people trying to take in the information, hoping everything you're saying is accurate. And it's also nerve-wracking for the person, the expert. Don't you agree? I agree. How many opportunities to get things wrong? As you say, you look back at things you wrote 10 years ago. It's like, oh, I kind of wish, I'm the same.
I know. Lara, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks.
Really appreciate you. This is just, as always, a really good sort of conversation just to explore the ideas a bit further. And I would be surprised if anyone listening to this aren't aware of you or don't know you, but where can people find out more from you, which is assuredly there is no disinformation that you're putting out there.
Right, I know. So I'm pretty easy to find. My main landing site is larabriden.com. And from there, I've got my books and links to social media. And I've got a little solo podcast. Not this. I don't put as much content as you, but I occasionally do a little. You do solo podcasts too sometimes, don't you? Like just
every Monday, little mini Mikipedias.
Oh, yeah, little mini. That's right.
Yeah, can't believe you don't know that. I'm just kidding.
Yes, I do know that. No, I do know. Well, like I said, I'm bad. I don't listen to health podcasts as much as
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Yeah, there can be. You can reach at the minute. I feel like I've reached the saturation point with my health podcast, which is really interesting. I think it's the time of year.
Yeah, I guess, what other types of podcasts do you listen to? Do you have other, what's your other guilty pleasure podcast?
Wow, that's a really great question. Almost everything is, it's all health related. It's all health and fitness related. It is actually. Isn't that interesting? It's either that or music. I can't listen to anything fictional. I can read fiction. I love reading fiction, but I cannot. But
you don't.
No.
I'll just quickly share in closing. I'm sure people have signed off by now, but I'll just share the 2 podcasts I've been listening to lately, not health related. One I just finished listening to was called The Last Invention, which is, I'm just plugging it because it's actually really good, about AI. It's about all the different views about where we're going with AI, which I think most people in 2025 maybe should be thinking about. And then the other one is called, I've always loved history podcasts, and various ones I've listened to through the years, Hardcore History, and the one I'm into right now is called The Rest is History, and they have just discovered they have 600 episodes. So
amazing.
I listened to one on ancient Greece, and I'm listening to one on the beginning of the Frank Empire and Dark Ages, and so a little kind of obscure, but
no, I love that. And in fact, I there are a couple, I do like Smartless, which is the Jason Bateman podcast, when they interview artists and movie stars and actors and things like that. So that is one which I enjoy. So it's hilarious, actually. So they do a good job. But that AI one sounds super interesting, Lara. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely.
All right.
Well, you have a great day.
All right. Well, thanks again. I'll see you soon. I'll see you in person in a couple months.
Lovely. Yeah. Thanks, Lara.
Okay. Bye.
Alrighty, hopefully you enjoyed that talk. I really did. I just love the thoughtful, considered way that Lara approaches health. She certainly isn't one to over-dramatize anything and is so careful about how she words things. But this is a topic that we have chatted about personally very often, actually, as to the role that we play in helping people be their healthy self, but without without it leading to overwhelm and neuroticism. So anyway, let me know what you think. Next week on the podcast, I speak to Curtis Gillespie-Sayer on, what do you know it, optimizing health, sort of. Until then, though, you can catch me over on Instagram, Threads, and X at Mikki Williden, Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, or head to my website, scroll right down to the bottom, pop your email in there and jump on my email list. It'd be lovely to see you. All right, team, you have the best week. See you later.